everyone. Welcome to the 5th episode of the TAQS.IM Middle Eastern podcast. I'm flying solo today as Antanek is currently on tour with his group Visa in Europe. Please check them out at experiencevisa.com. I'm joined by Joe Tayoun, who's an accomplished Middle Eastern percussionist that got to start playing at age 8 at his family's renowned Middle East restaurant in Philadelphia. Since then, he's become the unofficial torchbearer for Philly's Middle Eastern club scene. Joe also performed percussion solo on our group Aravod's first album, Into the Night. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, how you doing, Aaron?
Good. I think the first time we met was at Buffalo Bills back in the day.
Yes.
I remember we were going to college at the time. They had a Middle Eastern night like 3 blocks from where we lived. We walked in and we're like, oh my God, this is amazing.
That would have been quite a find as an Armenian college student, right 3 blocks away, and started playing maybe around 10 p.m. and didn't stop until maybe 4 a.m.
Yeah.
It was one of those.
It was crazy. Was it Edmund Joseph was playing?
Edmund Joseph got all that going. The late, great Edmund Joseph. He's one of those guys. There's almost nobody left that could sing in so many different languages. He even sang in Swahili. He had a couple songs in Swahili that he would sing. But I mean, he could sing in Arabic and Persian and Greek. And there's not many of those guys left that can do that. But he put that together. And he had Johnny Katsouris played guitar. Roger was playing oud, Roger Migradician. It was just a great scene because we were playing Arabic, Greek, Turkish, Armenian. We were playing it all. So it was truly a Middle Eastern night. And all those people came, plus the Americans. So it was just like this hot scene.
Yeah, I'd take friends from college and they'd just be blown away walking into this whole scene. So it was great. Can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you got started in playing Middle Eastern music?
Sure. When I grew up, my father and my uncle had the Middle East restaurant. Actually, my grandparents had started that at in a row home in South Philadelphia at 10th and Hillsborough.
Oh, wow.
They were there for 10 years. And that's where, they started playing, and Ray Merjanian started playing with them then. And it was just this little place and you couldn't get into it. It was like one of those finds.
So it was like a house party almost?
Yeah, but it was a restaurant. They turned it into a restaurant. And then it got to a point where they cut a hole in the ceiling and they created the balcony, which didn't come to the other Middle East after we left that one. They moved to Old City, but they cut a hole and they put a balcony there. And so the band would play up there, but it was a row home. So it was very small. And, there'd be lines out the door. Anybody who was anybody would go to the Middle East at that point. It was a chic place that, belly dancing, Middle Eastern culture was new and hot. They were selling falafel and hummus before anybody knew what it was. And people like Alfred Hitchcock went there. So they were there for 10 years. And then they got a place in Old City, a bigger place. And that's where we were for 30 years. So I got my start. Now, I was just small to actually even remember the first Middle East. But the second one that we were at for 30 years on 2nd and Chestnut in Philly, I grew up there. So you have to imagine this is a 5-story building with the first 2 floors were the Middle East. And they did what they did at the row home, but this was a big place. And they cut a hole in the first floor roof, and then they sunk a balcony. So there was a balcony that you would look up to from the first floor, and you would look down on from the second floor. And that's where the band played, on this little balcony. And they put a little spiral staircase. It was decked out. It looked like a scene from 1001 Arabian Nights. The lights on the ceilings were even flying carpet and tapestries and beautiful artwork and tile and brick walls and tile floors. We would have belly dancing and live music every night of the week, 7 days a week.
Oh, wow.
It was hot. And with the belly dance scene, that it goes and comes, it fades out and then comes back. So painting that picture, that's where I grew up as a kid. Mom would always take us there to see Dad. Dad would take us to work. My father was an oud player. He played oud as well. So I grew up going into that place, listening to all of these great musicians, be them either Turkish, Arabic, Armenian, Persian, Greeks. That's the music I heard growing up. And it was always live music, and they were great players. So eventually I just kind of took to that. So that was my start. That's how I started. And it was almost like a tour for us sometimes.
So who were some of the musicians that came through the doors
Yeah.
to the Middle East?
So I remember as a kid, Ray Merjanian, absolutely. And they made several Middle East records, and they were called Murta records, Merjanian Tayoun. Murta records. So they did several records from the Middle East, from different genres. So there'd be Lebanese music, Arabic, Armenian, Turkish. And that would be the kind of music that they would play at any given night at the Middle East. So Ray Merjanian was like one of the first ones that I remember. They had a Lebanese guy, Najib Nassar. he came and played organ. But I was such a privileged kid. Imagine growing up, who did they hire as the next oud player? He was out of work in New York. He was there. It was Chick Ganemian. So I got to play. I started playing with Chick Ganemian when I was like 14 years old and actually learning music from this guy. I remember one time we're playing a song and, I'm just a kid, I'm green. And he starts improvising the way he used to do and syncopating. And that just turned me on. And my face lit up and he saw it and we were done the song. And I'm like, and he looked at me and because he must have seen some kind of look on my face. He says, you like that, huh, kid? You like that stuff? I'm like, yeah, Chick, I love that. Can you do that stuff that you did? Remember in the middle of the song you were doing that stuff? I didn't have a word for syncopation, I said, could you please do that? He's like, oh, you really like that, huh? Kid, he punched me in the arm. I'm like, yeah, do it again. So Chick Ganemian, who was an oud player who was ahead of his time. I mean, he was playing through a Fender Twin and playing with people like Herbie Mann in the Village in New York. I mean, Herbie Mann was a very well-known musician, and they cut records called like the Wailing Dervishes and Impressions of the Middle East, which if you ever get a hold of those records, they're way ahead of their time, cut in the 60s. So there's Chick Ganemian. I got to play with musicians like a very wonderful, incredible Turkish musician, Farhat Alpar, who played saz and sang, and he played there for a long time. So I got to learn from him. I got to learn from Garib, who was just an amazing Turkish violin player. Edmund Joseph, of course. I had the privilege of playing with Joseph Budway, who when my father was a young man, he said that they used to go to whenever he was in town to go to concerts that he was giving. And Joe Budway, he toured North and South America in his prime. He was a very, very popular Lebanese oud player. Oh, Bobby, I'm looking at a picture right now. I'm in my house. I have some paintings from the Middle East. I'm looking at Bobby Sarkeesian. I played with Bobby a lot at the Middle East. I mean, I could go on and on. There's so many great musicians that came through there.
I'm sure it acted like the music hub of Philly for Middle Eastern music.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's what it was.
Yeah. In New York, there were several clubs going on. And in Philly, there was not. In Philly, there was the Middle East. And then at a certain point, Edmund Joseph opened up a place on South Street called Cafe Yaz. And that was operating at the same time that we were. It didn't last as long, but he had a little bit of a music scene going there too. But that was it. There was no, like not in New York. There was no scene like that.
Edmund, was he based out of New York initially and then came down?
Well, initially, I think he came straight from Iran. He came to the Middle East. And the legend has it that his first night there, somebody brought him in. And Edmund Joseph was kind of almost like a star in Iran. He played accordion, and I think he played American music in Iran. I don't know. It's crazy. He's got the most charmed life, the craziest stories that they're all true. But so the legend is that Edmund came in fresh from Iran, a young man, and my uncle and my dad, there was a big Jewish party there. And nobody knew how to play any Jewish music, but Edmund knew how to play Hava Nagila. And so my uncle said, get up there. And he played, and he was a hit. And so apparently he must have played Hava Nagila like half a dozen times that night. And then
a star was born.
But that's the only song he knew. I think he only knew American rock and roll music, and he was playing it in Iran. And he came here and he knew Hava Nagila, and then that's how he got working there. But then he went to New York and he came back, and he was always going back and forth between New York and Philly.
That is amazing.
Yeah. There's some so crazy stories.
So what is it that drew you to percussion initially? Was it you were just there and you started picking it up and you just kind of sat in with guys?
Yeah, at first, first of all, I was drawn to it. So I was always whenever if we were there visiting dad or whatever, and the band was playing, I was always looking at them and being mesmerized by them. So eventually I would go sit on the steps and watch them. And then eventually I was able to play tambourine. They said, I'll give the kid a tambourine. And then, I have older brothers. So my oldest brother, Eddie, he took to the drum. And so he started playing. He was like the house drummer. Then Eddie left. I had another older brother, Michael. He became a house drummer. And I was bussing tables watching these guys play. I'm like, damn, I just want to get up there. And I want that to be me. Finally, it was me. So Michael left. But I took more of an interest and more of a liking, and I never gave up my spot. I mean, I just loved it. I just kept learning more. And eventually, I was playing there in high school. I was playing maybe 4 nights a week in high school. I'd go there Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday.
What was the time periods from the initial row home to the place down on Second, and then after it?
Yeah. So we were at 10th and Ellsworth in the beginning, and that was for 10 years. I think starting in like 1959 is when they first started. And then they moved because it was so small, and they found a place in Old City that they bought. So like around 69-ish. And then for 30 years, so 10 years in South Philly, then 30 years there, we sold it in 1997.
What did that do to the scene in Philly for Middle Eastern music?
Well, there was no other place to go. There were some Greek places. There were Greek places, like that would open up at 2:00 in the morning. And so like even sometimes at the Middle East, I'd be playing there and they'd say, Joey, we need a Dumbaleki player over at Little Pete's. And I'm like, yeah, I can come. I'll be there at like 2:15. And we would start playing at 2:15 in the morning, and we wouldn't stop until 5 in the morning.
Hey, I remember the first time we went there. I don't know where we were. Then it's like, oh, let's go to this place. We go, we knock. I guess we must have like passed muster because they ended up letting us in, and all of a sudden there's like a bouzouki player and like drinks, and it's like
yeah.
in the morning. Yeah,
You're in another world. You're in a whole nother world. Yeah, it's like when you first stumbled onto Buffalo Bill. It's like, what?
it's like these are my people.
Yeah, are my people, exactly.
So then after that, there was kind of a lull period there. Was the Nile after that?
Yeah. So when we sold the club in 1997, actually my brother Mike and I ran the place for about 8 or 9 years before we sold it. So we started, say, about 1990-ish, say, and sold it in 1997. My dad and my uncle were going to sell the restaurant in like 1990. My brother Mike and I, we looked at each other and we went to them. We said, you can't sell it. We're going to take over. And then when the time is right, we'll sell it. And we're going to change things around. So we did. We did what we set out to do. We held on to it for a while. We turned it into a music venue. We were booking national acts. No Doubt played there. Bo Diddley played there. So we stuck with the music scene, but we just upped it a little bit. We kept the Middle East, but we toned it down a little bit and then sold it.
Yeah. So after closing in 1997, where did that Middle Eastern music scene transition to in Philly?
There was a guy had worked for our family for a long time. His name was Supli, and he was from Egypt, and he was a general manager. He opened up a place right next door, and it was a smaller building, and he named it the Nile. And then my brother Billy and I and Roger Megardician, we started playing, and then we started bringing more people in. We had belly dancers. So it was like one of my friends who was a comedian nicknamed it the Little East because we started having some really cool music there. And then other musicians started coming into our fold, like Hamid Golbashi, who was a Kurdish Nai player and Zurna player. The guy was a genius. He walked in one day, and his friend, who we're still friends with, Bülent, brought him in, and because he saw that there was a little music scene going, and he came up and played with us. And at the end of that night, we went to Subi. We're like, can we keep him? We want to keep this guy. He's a genius. We would play a song he never heard before, and after about a minute, he knew the whole song.
Yeah, I remember we played with them for a couple of jobs because they wanted like a Ney player, and literally he just sat up there, and we just let him go for like 2 hours.
He was amazing, and I learned so much from him, and he learned a lot from us too. But and that's another thing, like one of these, the musical development. Roger Megardician, who's my brother-in-law. It's funny. I'm going to backtrack. Here's a really cool story. So I was playing with Joseph Budway at the time, an oud player. He was 76, 75 years old at the time I was playing with him. Brilliant. So Roger, this is when I met Roger. He started coming in, hanging out at the bar. My sister Dina, who we eventually married, was bartending. So he would come in and says, yeah, I'm playing oud and all. And then I would tell Joe Budway, I'd go up to play. I'm like, hey. And Roger's, he's a couple years older than me. I'd say, hey, Joe, can this kid come up and play your oud a little bit? I'm telling Roger he's a kid. He's older than me. But Joe's like, yeah, no problem. So Roger would come up, and eventually after Joe Budway left, and so Roger was the natural progression. So me and Roger started playing at that time. This is in the early 90s. And my sister, she asked me, she's like, she goes, oh, you know who that guy is, right? I'm like, yeah. I'm like, that's Roger. She goes, oh, he's kind of cute. And I'm like, well, Dina, he's a good oud player. I said, marry him. He's a good oud player. I said, we need
one of them, right?
Then I won't have to pay him anymore. So eventually she married him. But Roger and I have been playing 26 years now together. So Roger and I became like a base. And then any musicians that would come through, like Hamid Golbashi, we were already a backup band for these ringers that would come through. And so we just became really good at accompanying anybody. And to this day, I mean, like Roger and I read each other's minds. And back in that day when we'd be playing and we do things exactly at the same time, at that same moment, you know what that is. And we'd look at each other and we'd start giggling, you know, we're like, oh, now, I mean, that stuff still happens to us. But maybe every now and then you might see a little wink or a little link that we acknowledge that it happens. It's like we read each other's minds.
Yeah, if you play with people long enough, there's this kind of unspoken communication that goes on. You can just read the other person, you know where they're going to go, what they're going to do, what their tendencies are.
Yes.
It just takes time to kind of build that up.
Yes. I mean, I can read his subtle body language, you know, and I'm sure he can read mine. Like he could just breathe a certain way and I'll know what he's going to do.
Yeah, what's interesting about you and Roger is your musical relationship spans so many different genres. Yeah, you guys are playing, you know, percussion and oud, but the context in which you play that is so different from the Middle Eastern clubs to some of your other projects, Jaffna and rock groups and all this other stuff.
And we love that. We love that so much, not having to be pigeonholed. I mean, we love playing our traditional music. We can play for hours and hours with all that. But we also love the challenge of playing and doing so many different genres. From rock, you know, we have Baraka, which is an original Turkish world rock band that we've been working with now and developing for the past 7-8 years. We even played in Istanbul about 4 years ago. We played with Jaffna. That's, I think, our favorite thing to do. And we have a tabla player who's from Sri Lanka. We have a guitar player who's a Hindu, Indian, and myself and Roger. And it's all original compositions that blend Indian and Arabic and Armenian and all the stuff that we know and grew up as Americans playing this music.
How has that impacted your playing, stepping out from your initial comfort zone with Middle Eastern music? How has it helped complement your playing when you play different styles?
I can tell you that one of the reasons why, besides the fact that these gentlemen are my absolute best friends, you know, and we're family, is that playing this music keeps me on the edge of my musicality as a musician. I'm playing on that fine line of, you know, where my potential as a musician can be. And the music is such that from 20 years ago till today, even songs we've played years and years and years, the music that we're playing evolves with us. And the way we play it evolves with us. And so I'm always playing on my edge of where I'm capable of playing.
So aside from all of the performance work that you've done, you've spent quite a bit of time educating people on Middle Eastern music. Can you get a little bit into what you do from an education perspective?
This is a big part of what I do. So I work with severely emotionally disturbed kids. I'm at a school up in Morrisville, PA, 3 times a week. Been working with residential kids that have been taken out of their homes. And the reason I got hired is because the head psychologist there, he calls me up. He says, Joe, I would like you to come and work with my kids. They need what you do. And he explains to me that why he wants to get drumming going on is because continuous repetitive motion, left, right, left, right, left, right. Could be dancing, could be moving your feet left and right, okay? But drumming, obviously you do that. This motion is very beneficial to the brain. I'm also working right now with women in recovery from addiction in a way that when you're drumming, you have to be present. You have to be in the moment. And at that very moment, you might not be thinking of your next hit.
You know, you talked a little bit about Jaffna, your Baraka group. What are some other projects you're involved with?
I'm a blessed musician because I get to work with so many great different people. I work with a woman, her name is Chin Chen, and she's from China. She's a virtuoso on the erhu, which is the double string Chinese violin. It's that sound that you hear in almost anything you see on TV that has anything to do with China. But one very a noteworthy a project that we're working on, and we've been working on for I don't know how many years now, 6 years or so. It's called the Roddenberries. This is a Star Trek sci-fi musical visual extravaganza.
So can you set the scene? Like, what is a Star Trek tribute band?
Okay. So we didn't know at first. We just knew we had to do this. So at one Fringe festival that my friend was procuring all the talent for, he would always come, you know, and say, hey, Joe, you got something for me? One year I bring him some belly dancers. Some year, you know, me and Bill Katsouris, you know, go and do some rock and roll Middle Eastern stuff.
You get like the yearly Joe Tayoun special.
Yeah, because he's my friend and he knows that I would produce something interesting for him starting at 2:30 in the morning to play for an hour or two for this crazy scene of Fringe Festival. So one year, Billy had learned part of the fight music you hear in the old Star Trek. Dun, 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 dun. So we said at one point in our thing, what we're going to do is, Billy, you're going to play that. I'll play some percussion, and we'll set up a microphone and have people in the audience, anybody, come up while we're playing this background music and just tell us about your favorite Star Trek episode. And so there was a line to get to the microphone at a certain point. There were that many techies. And some musicians.
Who knew?
Yeah, and then some musicians that were getting off their gigs, they were stopping by. Of course, it's the Fringe Festival to see, and they were jumping on stage with us and start to play this music with us. So we're looking at each other, and with Scott, my buddy, we all decided, yes, we must do this. And so we started it together. We called ourselves the Roddenberrys. We have a really cool band. We all dress up in different garb. We play, at this point, we play anything from Queen to Frank Sinatra. And we change the words up, we do the parodies. We also play music from the episodes, and it's like a cabaret. We got to a point where 2 years ago, for the 50th anniversary of the creation of Star Trek, Gene Roddenberry's son, whose name is Rod Roddenberry, hired us and flew us all to Las Vegas to play for the 50th anniversary of the creation of Star Trek at the Rio Hotel in Las Vegas.
Well, that's fantastic.
And we played for 3 days. I met Captain Kirk. So it's a lot of fun. We're actually having a CD release party for our second CD called Eat the Roddenberries. The producer and engineer for our second CD was Joe Nicolo, who was of Lauryn Hill fame, of the Butcher Brothers, who produced Lauryn Hill. And the party is June 27th. At the World Cafe live here in Philadelphia for our CD release party.
Yeah, and we'll post those links up. I'm just thinking, as you're talking through the range from going from the Middle East, playing with like Chick Ganimian to playing with like the Roddenberries.
Yes.
With Captain Kirk is just kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, well, we're Americans,
That's right. You got to adapt.
Right.
So for anyone that's interested in playing Middle Eastern percussion, do you have any words of advice based off your experience?
Any kind of instrument or any percussion or anything like that, you just have to keep playing. And you have to play with other people. You can sit home and you can become like this great virtuoso by yourself. But if you're not playing with other people, you'll have a hard time learning how to communicate and playing. And I know musicians like that. Like they have these wicked chops, but it's just hard for them to play in an ensemble. So make sure you're playing with people and playing with people at many different levels. Play with people that are not as good as you. But of course, make sure you play with people that are way better than you, because that's how you really learn. It raises the bar for you, and you learn what's possible by playing with these people. But you have to keep playing, and also find ways, even if, say, you have a full-time job, you still have to find out where the music's happening, even on a weeknight. But you got to go out to these things, because if you're just at home, that means you're just at home, and you're not out there where the music is. So you have to make you have to make certain sacrifices, and sometimes that's your sleep.
Yeah, that's so critical, especially playing with other people and people that are better than you. I know I've shared stages with musicians that I probably should not have been on the stage with.
We all have.
Yeah, but it makes you perform that much better and just pushes you to kind of get better at your craft. And there's all these unspoken things about being able to read a crowd and communicate with other musicians that are just so helpful to be able to do that. So I know that from the Middle East, you still do, I think once a quarter, a Middle East reunion party. And somehow you got me and Jimmy up on the stage to sing, even though I don't sing. All of a sudden you're yelling at us to come up, and I'm singing backup vocals, and I do not sing. So
you guys made my night. You made my night.
So how often do you guys do that, and where is it?
So that's every couple of months or so. It's not a set time. We do this for a reason, so that people come to it. They crave it. And then they come to the next one. So it's always every couple of months or so. The next one, like I think June 13th. It's always at Frankie Bradley's. And yeah, it's a blast. It's always a blast.
Yeah, and you had a great lineup when we were there. I think it was you were performing, Roger Mugardician, David Hoplamazian was there, Jake Turkanian, Steve Ospigian, your brother. I think Billy was there,
yes.
Chris Marashian as well.
Yeah, a lot of times Johnny Katsouris, and Bill Katsouris was there, who used to play at the old Middle East. He'll come. Yeah, it's quite a scene. And then we have belly dancers show up. Some of the very old belly dancers will show up from back in those days and get up and dance.
Belly dancers nonetheless, though.
Yeah, nonetheless. And it's a great scene because it's kind of like the old days. The crowd consists of a lot of us ethnic people, but then people that just stumble in and they find a little treasure. So it's still this really cool, exciting, scene. Yeah.
There was somebody singing as well last time.
Well, my cousin Michelle sang a couple songs, who's also a very good belly dancer.
She was singing all kind of classical Arabic stuff, which was fantastic.
Yes. So she sang. And then we had Barış Kaya was singing Turkish. He's actually the guy whose band Roger and I play in, and Billy actually, called Baraka, which is the original world rock Turkish group. Baraka.
And who's the other guy that got up and sang? He sang some great numbers.
I don't think he was ready to sing with us at that point.
Anyway, he was doing it for the love of song. So
yes, for the love of song. He sang in 3 different keys at once, I think. It
was fantastic. I think that was one of the highlights of the night.
It was fantastic.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time, Joe. It was an absolute pleasure. And I know me being from living in Philly and growing up in the South Jersey area, that this is stuff that I didn't know. And I'm sure it'll be a treat, for all of our listeners to listen to. And the reason why we're doing this is a lot of these stories go untold, or they're just an oral history that's gone there. So the more we can capture, the more we can record this stuff, all the better for posterity's sake.
It was my honor. And thank you. Thank you for listening.
Thank you again for listening to the podcast. You can check us out online at TAQS.IM or search for us on Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. Until next time.